Hi, this is Donna. Welcome to DD Paper Crafts. In today's video, we're going to be making another Pinterest inspired box. This was made by a champagne brand. The concept of the box is the lid is removed. This lid is actually fixed, and to access the gift, the outside element is pulled down like so. And then that reveals a door at the front and the gift is inside the box. And the outside can then just be pulled up again like so. I have made this box to fit a gift a specific size. The first thing I will do in the video is show you how I determined what size box I needed for my size gift. And you can then adjust these measurements accordingly to suit the size of gift that you have in mind for this particular box. You will notice that there are some voiceovers in the video because this is the only project I made and I therefore made some adjustments along the way. So let me show you how I put this project together. The first thing I'm going to do is go through how I calculated the size of the box that I needed for my particular gift. My gift is 6¼ inches high by 2 inches by 2 inches. For the height of the box that we want to make, I've got my gift, which is 6¼ inches high. I've got the depth of the two outer bands. So these are the bits which pull up and down on the outside. So I will have a band at the top and a band at the bottom. So that is 1/2 inch by 2, gives me 1 inch. I've allowed 1/4 inch spare at the bottom and then 1/2 inch above the gift. So add on an extra 1/2 inch, and then the top rim or the top of the box front is 3/4 inch. So that means that my box is going to be 8¾ inches tall. This is my gift. My box front is going to sit like so. So as the outer comes down, we need to allow the 1/2 inch for the bottom band, which will remain fixed at all times. 1/2 inch for the top band, which pulls the outside pattern paper down on the outside. And then I've allowed 1/4 inch spare. Because the concept is this big opening is the door, which is going to open like so. You're going to want to get your fingers in, pull the box up and then out of the front. So I've had to allow enough leeway for the box to come out of the opening, because the opening does not run from top to bottom of the main box. Hopefully that will make sense as to how I've come up with the height of the box. And you can, of course, change up the element above at the top edge of the box if you want. You could make that bigger. You might not think you want 1/4 inch spare, and you might not think you want 1/2 inch bands. This is just to explain how I've come up with my measurements. In terms of the width of the box, so that's the element running across the front, I've got the gift width, which is 2 inches. I've then allowed 1/2 inch either side of the gift to get your fingers into the opening to get the gift out. Now you may feel this is too much, you may feel that's not enough. For me, in terms of the shape of the gift I'm putting in and the recipient, I know that 1/2 inch either side is going to be enough. And then I want the space around the door frame, so around the outside of the opening, to be 1/2 inch either side. So I've then added an extra 1/2 inch on either side, my extra 1 inch. So the width of my box is going to be 4 inches. And in terms of the depth of my box is 2 inches deep. I've just allowed 1/4 inch, just so that there is room in the box and it's not rammed in, as it were. My gift is 6¼ by 2 by 2, and my box is going to be 8¾ by 4 by 2¼ For the internal box, I have 2 pieces of cardstock, which are 9 3/4 times 6 3/4. Along the 9 3/4 inch side, so this is going to be the height, score at half and 9 1/4. On the short side, we're going to score at half and 4 1/2. Do that on 2 pieces. On one of the pieces, you will need to mark and cut your door opening. I will just go through now the method that I used to calculate where my door opening was going to be for my particular box. If you imagine that this is the front of the box, so this piece is 4 inches wide and it's 8 3/4 inches tall. If you remember, I allowed a 1/2 inch frame for my door, so my first markers are going to be 1/2 inch in from the left hand side of the door front and 1/2 inch in from the right hand side of the door front, and that will be this here and this here, and one of these will be a cut line and one of these will be a score line, depending on how you want your door to open. My preference will be that this is a score line and this is a cut line, so that my door opens like so. If you recall, I allowed 3/4 inch at the top for the box front. So my marker will be 1/2 inch in from the left and 3/4 inch down from the top, 1/2 inch in from the right and 3/4 inch down from the top. At the bottom end of the front piece, I'd allowed 1 inch for my 2 bands and then 1/4 inch spare. So my bottom markers will be 1 1/4 inch is up from the bottom of the cardstock on the left and on the right. And that will give me my 4 markers through which I will create my door. Let's put these markers into place on the cardstock. If it's not your intention to put pattern paper on the front of the box, your markers will be at 1 1/4 inches down, at 1 inches and 4 inches. So you will have a pencil line in line with the 1 1/4 inch mark at 1 and 4, and then you repeat that at 8 inches down at 1 and 4 across, and that will give you your 4 points, which you can then join up and then decide whether you're going to have your score line on your left or your right, and you will score between the 1 1/4 and 8 inch mark at 1 inch or the 1 1/4 and 8 inch mark at 4 inches. So that's if you're working on the front directly and you're not putting pattern paper on. I'm going to put pattern paper on the front of mine, so I'm going to work on the reverse of the cardstock. I'm going to line my ruler up with the 1 1/4 inch mark and make sure that my ruler is running horizontally, and my first pencil mark will be at 2 3/4 inch. My next one is at 5 3/4 inch. I'm going to move my ruler down to my 8 inch marker on my scoreboard and do the same at 2 3/4 inch and 5 3/4 inch. I want my door to open from the left. I'm therefore going to score between the 2 pencil marks at the 5 3/4 inch track on my scoreboard. I'm going to flip that over and just rescore between the 2 like so. So that is the opening for my door. I'm going to join up the pencil dots so that I know I've got my full lines marked, ready for when I come to cut those with my craft knife. That's my door marked. Let's fold and burnish our 2 pieces. I've got my 1/2 inch tab on the left, and the cutting of the glue tabs will be the same on both pieces. I'm going to remove the bottom left hand square like so, cut up the next score line within the 1/2 inch tab and take a wedge from those. Do the same on this one, rotate, we can take a wedge from that end, remove this corner like so. Take a wedge from that end, take a wedge from there. Ignore this. If you can see this track, ignore it. I incorrectly scored. And then take and then create our last glue tab. I'm now going to add all of my patterned paper on. You want to add it on to the door front at least, if that's what you're having. And you then want to make sure that you've added all of your pattern paper if you're having it on all four sides of the internal box before we add the outer elements on. My patterned paper will be 8.5 by 3 3/4 on the front and back, and 8.5 by 2 on the sides. I've added my pattern paper on to the four sides of the box. This is the fabulous fuchsia paper pad from Crafter's Companion. This is the piece that I have got my door marked into. I want to get one cut on all sides. I've made sure that I've got a new blade in my craft knife. Obviously wait until your glue is dry on your pattern paper, and now I'm going to cut through to make the door opening. That's the door now cut. Because I've added the DSP on, that's obviously stiffened up the cardstock. I'm just going to go over the score line again because I've gone over the score line with the pattern paper. So let's re-put the score line in, and now I can fold back the door gently. Let's now add the box together. We'll do this in the conventional sense in that we'll add glue to the long glue tab here, join the two pieces together, add glue to the long glue tab here, and then join up the box. So that's our main box. We now want to add on the top and the bottom. Remember, the gift is going to go in from the front, so the bottom and the top are going to be sealed. Got two pieces of 4 inches by 2 inches, and they're going to sit on the top and the bottom of the box like so. We'll now make the outer part of the box, and we'll start by making the bands which are going to sit at the top and the bottom. The bottom band will be fixed onto the outside of the box, and the top band is obviously going to pull down. For the bands, I'm going to use the same cardstock as the base of the box, because certainly for the top one, I want that to have the strength above just using pattern paper on its own. This strip has come from the offcut of the cardstock that I use for the base, and it's 9 3/4 of an inch long. For the look of the box, I would rather I have a piece running across the front and across the two sides, and then one additional piece which just runs across the back. So I'm going to try and achieve that by laying the outer box on. I'm going to wrap this side around and pull that across. So I'm effectively making my score lines manually rather than in this scoreboard. And that will come across like that. I can pinch on the edges, make sure that's sitting nice and tightly. Cut this tab down, I don't need it to be that long, and I'm going to just add some shape into them. Let's add some glue onto this strip. Sit that over the front, line it up with the bottom. I'm going to do one side at a time. I really want this to sit tightly on the base. I don't want any gaping. Obviously the band is going to be covered, but we do want this to sit as nice. I'm going to pinch on that corner and just pull this around to sit my next 1/2 inch band over the top and mark where I need to cut this, then stick this one in place. So I'm happy with that. We'll now follow the same process for the band at the top, but obviously this is not going to be glued to the box because it needs to move up and down. We're now going to add the outer strips on. I've cut 4 pieces and they are the complete width and the height of the box. I've got 2 pieces which are 8 3/4 by 4 and 2 pieces which are 8 3/4 by 2 1/4. I'm going to use tape for this because I want to make sure that I don't get my glue, certainly on this top strip, anywhere other than on the band. I'll demonstrate on one what is going to happen. This is going to sit flush with the top of the band, like so. Run around the outside of the box, like so, and then it's going to be glued, and I can use my quick grab glue just on the band and stick that into place. Carry on doing that on the remaining sides. The outer element is on the box and it does pull up and down around the outside. The only place I found it was catching was at this top corner here, so I've just rounded off the top element of that door, and then that's an indication that there's something behind, as it were. The final element will be the lid. The piece for the lid is 5.5 plus a 1/16 by 3 3/4 plus a 1/16. And on all 4 sides, I'm going to score at 3/4 of an inch. Fold and burnish on all 4 sides. The tabs will run into the longest section, so I have my piece in a landscape orientation. Cut up the first score line to release the corner. Do the same at the other end. I'm going to take a wedge off of the ends of these tabs. Do the same on the opposite side. Add your glue to the 4 corner tabs. Pull the tab round and under to form your lid. That's our completed lid. That fits snugly on the outside, holds this element in place, and that sits lovely like so. And you can of course change up the length of the sides on the lid. So now it's just a case of adding any additional decoration to the box. I've added my decorative paper to the top of the lid. I've added a simple sentiment onto the front. I worked out the placement of the sentiment by pushing the outside layer down, like so. When the band was underneath the door and at its lowest point, I knew that I could add my sentiment onto this section here. This is just on a foam pad, but it wasn't then going to affect the pattern paper coming down the outside of the box. I added a simple circle folded in half on the front, and that runs into the back of the door section like so. Just waiting for that glue to dry. By cutting the corner away from the door at the top, that's indication that the door can be opened. So the outside does pull back up like so. So that works quite easily. And then the lid sits on the top. Overall, I'm quite happy with how this box has come out. I think it's very effective, and I certainly think for a special Christmas gift with festive paper on the outside and maybe a gold or silver mirror box as the inside box, it would certainly be quite a stunning gift box, presentation box idea. And of course there are elements of it that you can tweak, such as the depth of the lid on the outside, maybe adding an additional band around the base, maybe adding an additional band around the outside of the top. There are things you can do to make it your own. I hope you've enjoyed today's project. If you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to the channel. And until next time, thanks for watching.